The question, are Democrats ready to move on from President Biden? A recent op-ed in The Atlantic argues he is too old to be president and that he has no business running for a second term. Sentiments many people think and probably talk about around the dinner table. Recent polling shows some Democratic voters agree. A third saying they'll vote for someone other than the president in the upcoming primaries. But who? For more, let's bring in NewsNation political analyst Mick Mulvaney. He was President Trump's acting chief of staff from 2019 to 2020, and NewsNation political analyst Chris Hahn, who worked with Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer. Good morning to you both. I know, Mick, you have the piece running in The Hill today in response to this. On a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being just bow out now, President Biden, how alarming is this?
It's getting there, Adrienne, and that's why I wrote the piece this morning in The Hill, is that Republicans have been talking about this for a long time. You would expect them to. You would expect your political opponents to focus on your weaknesses. But when this piece ran in The Atlantic, which is one of the most left-leaning media outlets in the country, that sort of got my attention. When Republicans start criticizing Republicans, I pay attention. When Democrats start criticizing Democrats, I pay attention. So I think you hit the nail on the head at the very beginning, which is that sounds like within certain Democratic circles now, they're starting to talk more and more publicly about what a lot of folks have been speaking about privately, what a lot of voters think about, what a lot of families think about. When they talk about Joe Biden over the 4th of July, they didn't probably talk about Ukrainian policy. They talked about whether or not he was too old to serve. So it does look like that debate is filtering percolating its way up within Democrat talking circles.
Chris, you have to admit, I know you're a very direct, straightforward man. You have to admit that this is not happening in a vacuum. This is a pervasive conversation. And finally, it appears as though a lot of Democrats don't think it's taboo anymore. What is your response?
You know, when somebody gets to the age of 80, everybody starts saying, when is that person going to step aside? Let somebody else take the reins. Let somebody else lead. But that said, I don't see any serious challenge to Biden yet. And I think that Biden will be there as long as he wants to be the candidate. You even have Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez announcing that she would be supporting Biden last week on a very influential Democratic podcast. So I am not seeing this groundswell from the leadership in the Democratic Party to remove him. That said, if Biden should choose at some point to decide not to run, I'm sure there are plenty of people who could step in.
Plenty? We have two. Mick, who in the world would be the other candidate? RFK Jr.
Oh.
Maybe.
No, none of those two.
No,
So.
No. I think Chris is right.
It's not going to be Vice President Harris.
She would probably be on the list. Chris is right. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is not a legitimate candidate in terms of he's going to be the next president of the United States. I see him, and Chris may agree with this, as sort of a placeholder for Democrats who are willing to publicly say, I'm not vote Republican, but I'm really not happy with Biden. That's what that Kennedy 25-30% stands for. But they've got a halfway decent bench. I mean, Governor Newsom of California would probably run. Governor Pritzker in Illinois. You would think Cory Booker would probably run. Kamala Harris certainly would run, I would expect, if Joe Biden bows out of the race. Wes Moore in Maryland might run. Listen, we've got 16 or 15. I don't know. I've lost track of how many Republicans we have, but I hadn't heard of 3 or 4 of them 2 months ago.
Her approval ratings, with all due respect, Mick, her approval ratings are even worse than President Trump's. I think the Democrats are really at a loss.
Well, Gretchen Whitmer would be an excellent candidate for president of the United States. So would Gavin Newsom.
Gavin Newsom's not going to run. Come on.
And frankly, let's be very clear about Vice President Kamala Harris. Most people in this country don't have a really solid opinion of her. That's right. They don't wake up every morning saying, what is she doing today? No, I mean, the opinion's driven by, some negative press coverage. If she became a candidate for president, she'd have a very good opportunity to turn that around. And if she didn't, somebody else would step in there. That's what primaries are for. But that said, I think Joe Biden will be the Democratic nominee for president of the United States, especially if Republicans continue to vote, continue to appear, as they appear to be renominating Donald Trump. Barring some major turn of events, that's what's happening right now.
Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.